Yo, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're checking out a free plugin. It has been out for a while. This is of course Zebralette 3, so many of you have probably checked this out. I grabbed this when it initially came out and I didn't really spend too much time with it until recently. The last couple of weeks I've kind of fully immersed myself in this for a project that I'm working on. So I thought let's just quickly take a look at some of the interesting stuff that you can do with this. And it kind of create like a little bit more of an experimental kind of sound here, just to showcase, you know, how far you can leverage a single oscillator and MSEG in this case. It's incredibly powerful and very much groundbreaking. I don't know of anything that works in this method, which is pretty exciting because, of course, this is the precursor to Zebra 3. So when that finally comes along, it has been announced. They briefly showed off some of it, obviously, at Super Booth, which I managed to check out. But obviously that will be a lot more complex with many more tools that you can use as well. But just in terms of just a single oscillator here, there is so much interesting ground that you can cover sonically. So let's dive in. I want to just kind of run through one or two very important concepts to grasp with Zebra. I think also as well, even if you're not getting this for sound design stuff, you should just grab it just for the utility. When you're working with the oscillators here, you can actually export these as wavetables for other synths as well. So you can do some really cool stuff with morphing these splines around. It also imports stuff too, so you can edit stuff. It doesn't import waves. It will scan the waves and then import these splines traced from the waves as well as single cycles, which is useful to have. But we're going to create something from the ground up here, using all the editing tools and manually sort of shape our sound. Right, let's just start off with a blank canvas here, a wave, regular saw wave. Now, one thing that you need to realize about how we're going to start off with the oscillator, the MSEG, they both work the same way for the most part. We'll come down to that one in a bit. Let's start off with the oscillator here. One thing that you have to realize is there's two different ways that this oscillator presents information to you. And there's also two different ways to render the audio coming out of this, which presents different options as well. So currently we set to wavetable. It's important to realize this is not actually a wavetable. It is functioning in the same way that you can morph between different waveforms that are dictated by this spline editor, the curve editor. In wavetable mode, it's generating sort of more regular audio, you know, based on the shape of the wave. It's going to convert this into audio essentially. Obviously, you can also then switch over to the additive mode. Now, this allows you to change things in different ways. You'll notice it sounds slightly different here now to the regular wave. That's mostly just because the random phase is on, so you'll see that we're back to normal again. But obviously, this you're affecting harmonics now. So you've got additional tools, like you can use this expansion to bunch harmonics into areas. If you compress them right down to just a sine wave, for example. The other thing that you need to, well, the main one that I need to discuss here is the source, curve geometry or the curve spectrum. Now, what you have to realize is the geometry presents information over time. So you have a cycle, which is a time domain, and it will show you the amplitude of the wave or the shape of the wave over that cycle. So that's a time domain. If you click into curve spectrum mode, you're no longer talking about time, we're talking about frequency. So what happens here is, if you're looking at your waveform in, let's go back to geometry. If you do that, there's no amplitude anywhere, it's just full, nothing going to happen there. If we do that, for example, it's going to give us a pulse. And if we were to move that pulse all the way back down here, it's a fine pulse wave. We have narrow pulse. If we switch this over to spectrum now, and you heard earlier the saw sounds the same, but now if we switch that back with this pulse wave, we have a sine wave. And that's because this section, this frequency band is now at full. You can also switch this on which will allow you to kind of be quite specific. So that's 1 and 2, basically. That's 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 4 harmonics, 5, and so on. And that's just a single harmonic there. If we go back to our saw wave, see, it sounds like a saw now again, but this is basically how saws are built, with harmonics gradually tapering off. If I want that saw to be brighter, we could bring this up, and you have more harmonic content here at the top now. Just be very careful coming all the way too high here or too much mid-range stuff. Like a triangle wave will sound really, really loud in this mode, in the spectrum mode. But you can start to see now how you can use spectral editing like this to do things like filtering, which you don't have a regular filter in this plugin. But you can kind of mimic filtering by doing things like this, cutting out the harmonics. And they actually give you some specific tools for that. You've got a filter here, which is a spectral filter. It's basically just rolling off the upper harmonics, bringing them down, and you're left with the lower ones. You can obviously change that to band pass or high pass as well. Now, there's also interesting stuff that you can do with guides. Now, guides are layers on top of your splines that you have that you can use for various different tools. You can use them for cutting and stuff. We'll show you that in a second. The other way that they work is they can be used as sort of a path for some of these effects to utilize. So, for instance, if I switch this to the curve filter now, you'll notice it's a little bit dull. It's because it's currently using the guides to derive its filter shape. So if we use the guide now to make that steeper and come up brighter, we've essentially designed our own sort of filter curve now. You can play around with that even further and do more interesting stuff, like maybe, add a big notch here somewhere. And maybe let's do another one there. Now you've got some really interesting effects happening there. And that's just because it's utilizing this guide now to affect the filter instead. So bear that in mind. We're going to do a lot of interesting stuff with that in just a sec now. Okay, so that's basically the concept. I just want you to, just get that into your head that this is two different time and frequency domain that we're working with here when you switch between those modes. And the same goes for the guides. They do different things at different times depending on what effects you are using. Cool. So let's start the sound off first. I'm going to start off with just brighten the saw up a little bit. We're going to stay in curve spectrum and wavetable for now. So it's got like a really bright saw going on there. Let's do some more interesting stuff with our splines here first. So let's add in a new one. And let's go to our stamp section here. So we can, let's do this. Maybe we'll actually do it like a curve like that. So we'll put in one of those, we'll come back, and now we can get into these cool editing tools that we have. We can use a clone tool, for example. We could, let's maybe copy this one again. Let's just duplicate this one for now. Make a few different things and we'll just see what we come up with. I'm really do a lot of just random experimenting with this plugin. We'll use the warp tool now. We can maybe skew all of these over to one side. That's in linear mode. Let's actually undo that. I want to go exponential. And we can experiment with different versions of this as well. Let's maybe try the other direction as well. Distribute. Duplicate that one. Maybe we'll just do the same warp exponentially, but we'll warp it in a different direction maybe. Now, I don't want to play this back yet because, as I said, you have to be really careful about working in curve spectrum mode with the amount of harmonic content up at the top there. If we switch this back to geometry, we could take a listen to what this sounds like. It's going to go really high pitched because of the amount of waves that we've got in there now. Pretty interesting stuff, but we're going to go back to the spectrum mode. And I'm going to make sure that we don't have too much of that. And by that, we can actually just use the sculpting or carving method using the guides. And these are supremely useful in this aspect. Let's basically just conform them all to a saw. So we're essentially going to be doing like a window, our guide open here, and we right click on it and say we want to scale below the guide. All right, so it's going to pull everything down. You can also do interesting stuff like, let's say, for instance, I don't want all of these to come down to 0. So we could actually take our guide once again and maybe move it like so, and like, let's do that. And we could now right click again and we could say scale curve above the guide. And now you get something slightly different again, scale below again. And you see, you kind of use this to carve out a shape that you want. And now in curve spectrum mode, if we come over to this, it's not going to be so unruly. And of course, this triangle, we've got to be careful of that. Let's actually just remove the triangle for now. So we've got some interesting bits and pieces here now that we can play around with. Cool. So let's also just tweak the method of morphing here as well, because there's another thing that nets you pretty interesting results. Let's also just take these and just redistribute evenly across the whole wave set. And so from here, we can go take a look at the way that it's morphing, the morph targets. Using this tool, you can kind of scale through and just see what's happening. So you're kind of getting this, pulling out details from the sides and in. From the regular saw, I actually want it to be sort of more uniform. So what we can do is we can go and say crossfade instead. And you'll see now it's just going to morph like so. But you can have different settings for each segment that you're going to do. So from this one, I might want to actually maintain some of that nice texture that we're getting. So let's go from here, from this one. I really like what's happening there. So in actual fact, what we're going to do here is I want to kind of create a smooth loop of that motion. So we'll take this one and we'll duplicate it to there. And let's just say distribute evenly again. So we're going to go from 25, we're going to go there we go, something like that. So now I've got some interesting motion there. We're getting some interesting stuff there. I think that's good enough. We can play around with that. Let's also play around with the MSEG now, just to take a look at what you can do here, because this is super interesting as well. Let's assign our MSEG to the movement that we have in this section here. So we're going to assign that to this. I'm going to pull this all the way up to max. We can kind of flip it over in reverse. Pull that down, modulate it. So the top here is essentially going to be our regular saw wave that we have. So we can first start off by doing, something like this, just pretty simple. And that should start us off with giving us that pluck sound from the saw and then moving through. Now I want to set up a loop that we're going to kind of capture those textural elements between this 50 and 100. So let's expand our loop a little bit here and bring this up. And let's also just bring our release time out a little bit. And we can now draw in some modulation that'll capture that sort of bubbliness that we have, that texture there. Now you can adjust the loop times here. You can also globally adjust the loop times for all of the points in the MSEG as well. Okay, we'll do something like that. Okay, let's adjust it for another point now. So just very much in the same way that you can, run through different shapes in the oscillator section. We can also do the same with the MSEG as well. So let's open this up, and let's use this kind of as our main, our regular oscillator, or our regular sort of movement. So when our MSEG curve morph is set to the end, we can have a different motion. Let's say maybe something like reverse there. That's like the less attacky one now. We have something a little bit more detailed here, maybe. Also do interesting things like, again, using the stamps, for example, maybe kind of have little like licks or whatever of whatever, we'll play around with this. And then we can also do something like this, for example. Let's go back and add an empty, or not an empty curve. Let's just reduce that to a duplicated curve. Okay, so now if we come back all the way to this side, we can do things like, let's take maybe an S curve. And of course, you've got all the same editing functionality. So we could grab, let's move this guy over first. We can grab the cloning tool and just clone that out. And maybe use the exponential warp tool here to do something interesting with these. Just make sure that we set to expo. We'll do that at 50. We'll do this one at 75. And let's copy this one again. Let's just see what happens. We can experiment with this even more. We'll stick with this idea of doing, let's turn off edge select again, just a regular select. And move. We'll stick with this idea of having this kind of slowing down effect. But what we can also do here is maybe adjust the curve a little bit using the guides once again, because we have... Okay, let's play around with this now. Now I want to kind of get into the oscillator effect section here, because this is where things really get interesting in terms of the sound design aspect of this. Okay, so when we have that set at 0 or 50, we'll have kind of more normal behavior. Let's go in, one of my favorite ones is this spectral decay. Now what this is doing is it actually adds a decay or volume decay to each specific harmonic depending on a guide that you set. So same way that we've been using the guides before, we can come in here and edit the guides. Now this works on the spectral level again, like I showed you with the spectrum mode over there. So having this set higher up means that you'll have the higher up frequencies decay longer. And vice versa. Maybe the low frequencies will be muted quicker. Now, using the morph here, you can actually morph between 3 guides. The green is always going to be your kind of 12 o'clock, red is going to be to the right, and blue is going to be to the left. So we can get to 12 o'clock here and listen to what happens if we mess around in different ways with the curves here. So let's see what happens if we start. Let's actually go into this spectral one. See what happens if we start doing very specific things, like maybe removing the decay from harmonic number 3. And it's too much of this mid-range stuff here. And kind of more highs, I guess. that's kind of cool. Gives us more sort of bell tone now. You can see what happens in the background there. That's actually the harmonic levels. Okay, let's do one last one here. And you can play around with tools like the warping. There's some interesting stuff happening there now. Right, okay, so let's just start adding some modulation to this so we can start getting some more experimental sound going on here. We can also play around with the second effect as well. Another one of my favorites for these kind of bell sounds is this twinkles. So twinkles actually requires a gate signal, and we could actually even use the MSEG that we've got this kind of weird rolling and stuff happening here to apply those twinkles, and we can also have twinkles run through the spectral decay as well. That's actually really nice. Let's bring the MSEG in now, because we're not actually utilizing some of these things yet. So maybe we'll just kind of do quite a lot of random stuff in this patch. We'll go random values for our MSEG, so we're going to end up with all sorts of weird movement happening. And let's just double check. Are we on pre-listen? So listen to this now. Right, so let's try and move this into the additive renderer and see what we can come up with there to affect this even more. Gives us some additional tools to kind of mess with the harmonics. We're going to set that to random. I like it gets sort of like a little bit of a looseness with that. Right, now so the spectral distortion is decided by the modifier that we have here. So compression, for example, would kind of compress all the harmonics together, which is actually really nice. So I think we'll probably use that. You could also do other ones, like actually even use the curves that we have in our oscillator, or the curve set. You can do stuff like log clusters, which cluster everything together. So that'll be our sort of base. We'll add a little bit of randomness to that, but also a little bit of velocity control to the spectral distortion. So we'll start quite pure at low velocities. Let's move over to the matrix here. Add a velocity modifier to the spectral distortion. So we're going to... Here we go. I'm also going to add some of the noise via the velocity as well. You also get quite a lot of different tones by changing the amount of harmonics as well. Like you can keep it quite low resolution, or bump it all the way up to 1024 frames, or bins. That's really nice, actually. Cool. Let's also just maybe add a little bit of randomness to that as well. So we could maybe go to our random amount here. We're actually not modifying our spectral decay yet either. We're only using the 1 at the moment. So let's go completely random with that as well. We'll just add random to that for now. Let's just see what happens. Now all I'm going to do is just go and add in a little bit of reverb here. And bring in some delay. And let's take a listen to the final product. There's a lot of randomness in this one, but just, I don't know of many synths that'll put you in this kind of sonic territory. Let's take a listen. One last thing, just grab an up, just to check out what it sounds like. Cool. I mean, there you go. Like really, really interesting ground that you can cover with this. Obviously, you're going to be super cool once you have a lot more control over these inside of Zebra with all the filters and that kind of thing. Let me know if you enjoyed this one. We can do some more sort of intentional stuff. If you finish things a little bit more specifically, you can get some really more bread and butter sounds, but interesting versions of them using spectral synthesis like this. Obviously, for these kind of bell sounds, additive sounds, it really is very, very cool just to kind of experiment with this. Very organic, this as well. Cool. So let's stop it there. I will put the preset up on the Patreon if you guys want to go grab that. Otherwise, definitely go check out Zebralette 3. It's free, of course, from you here. Just go and grab it and have a lot of fun. It's complex but super interesting once you kind of get your head around the concepts here. Otherwise, I will catch you soon here on the channel. Till then, take care. Speak to you then. Ciao.